I'm excited to talk today about how and when we can heal past wounds. So a lot of times when people come into my office, they want to know a few things. They want to know what is happening to me, why is it happening to me, and how do I fix it? And that's what we're going to talk about today, starting with why I want them to get the word fix out of their vocabulary. Can't wait for you to join us. So again, when people come into my office as a trauma therapist, so they already know that that's my title, and they already know somewhere in their life they're going to embrace this idea that they've got some trauma in their past. That's hurdle one. When I was working in clinics that didn't use the word trauma, or in hospital settings, or any other parts of my career that didn't use the word specifically trauma, I often had to spend the first few sessions with people just convincing them that they had something in their lives that needed to be labeled as that. Instead, people now know a lot more thanks to social media, thanks to, all kinds of access to information. They understand a lot more what trauma is and how things like a traumatic event or a situation that their body responded to as if it was traumatic can lead to in childhood can lead to things, relationship issues and just stuckness as an adult. People have a lot more awareness about that. So they come into my office and they say, this thing's happening. I don't like it. Help me fix it. And the very first thing I get them to do is drop that word fix from their vocabulary, because you're not broken. In fact, just the opposite. Any human being that sits across from me, whether it's in a group or whether it's individual or whether we're doing a coaching session, any individual that comes to me with these adaptations that are no longer serving them is anything but broken. In fact, quite the opposite. They have, along the road of their life, come up with working mechanisms to cope with whatever situation they were in at the time. And typically they end up in my office because they are no longer working for them. Those adaptations, those coping skills, those mechanisms that they created somewhere along the road for their own survival are no longer working. And their nervous system is sort of tricked into thinking they're still in danger of whatever it was they were in danger from as a kid, as a young adult, as a teenager. And so I immediately get them to drop the word fix because they are not broken. And then we do move into what I call healing. And if you can go back to those moments where the thing happened, or the series of things happened, or the relationship was broken, what was in need of repair, or was not what you needed at that time in your life. If you can go back to those moments and heal those wounds, then you no longer need the adaptations that you've developed and that are causing you a little bit of trouble in your adult life. So you're not broken. Let's start there. Everybody that comes to me is very whole, very resilient, and superheroes for getting to my office in the first place. So if you're listening to this and you're somebody who's asked themselves that question, what is happening to me? Why is it happening? And how do I fix it? Drop the fix and let's get to healing. So the first thing I start with folks is an awareness of your thoughts, an awareness of the sensations, and awareness of the emotions. So that part of what is happening to me. Well, what is happening to you in those moments that you are triggered, whether it's in an argument with your partner, or whether it's the boss at work that reminds you of someone, or whether you're walking through a store and you smell a certain smell. Those things that trigger our nervous system into that fight or flight or freeze or fawn or any of a number of reactions, that nervous system is triggered into thinking we are not where we are. We are somewhere else and we are in danger. I often tell my clients that the goal of our sessions together is to move from being unsafe, feeling unsafe, to simply just feeling annoyed. Because I never want to invalidate the fact that my clients are feeling things. You're feeling something for a reason. And so if you're with your partner or your spouse or your kids or a coworker and you are really, feeling like you want to fight, chances are good that there is a reason for you to be annoyed. There is a reason for you to be frustrated. There is a reason for you to feel something. It just might not be the feeling that you're unsafe and you need to do something for your own survival and protection. So we're trying to move in my office from I'm unsafe and I need to fight, or I need to flee, or I need to, lay down and hope that nobody notices me. We're trying to move from that to I'm a human being with human emotions, and this situation is really getting on my nerves and I need to do something about it to change that. Because when you're in that first state, where you're in that fight, flight, fawn, freeze, any of those, you actually can't do the second part. You're not going to change anything for the better. Because again, your nervous system is reacting as if you're in danger. And you're not in danger, you're just annoyed, or you're just sad, or you're just frustrated, or one of the other millions of human emotions that we all feel throughout a day. So instead of fixing something, we're going to go back and heal those parts that felt the need to have those adaptations to begin with. And we do that by first being aware of what is happening. What's going on in my body? What's going on around me when that action happens? And that's identifying your triggers, understanding what are the things that are going to set off that nervous system alarm bell. And then the awareness of what is happening inside me at this moment. When that nervous system alarm bell set off, what goes on for me? Do I have my heart rate increase? Do I start sweating? Do I start sort of seeing blurry? Do I feel red in my cheeks? And all of those reactions and all of those adaptations, if you will, serve a purpose. But if we're not aware of sort of when they begin or how they begin, then it's hard once it's all started happening for us to pull it back in. So if we start to gain an awareness of how does our body feel when it's feeling peaceful? How does our body feel when it's feeling good? How does our body feel when we're sad? How does our body feel when we're annoyed? How does our body feel when we're unsafe? Only then can we tell the difference. And so we spend a lot of time in my office, and I would encourage everybody to spend a lot of time just paying attention to themselves, understanding their body, understanding their reactions, and especially, and I think this is what we skip out on a lot when we talk about trauma and when we talk about repairing and healing, we skip out a lot on what does it feel like to feel good? How does joy feel? How does contentment feel? How does peace feel? How does safe feel? Because if you don't know how safe feels, how are you going to know the difference between safe and unsafe? Because if you know how safe feels, then you also know how annoyed feels. If you know how safe feels, you know how frustrated feels. And you know that those two things aren't unsafe. They're just really annoying. And so if you get to understand your own systems, your own feelings and sensations, then it's much easier to delineate between safe and unsafe. It's not a black and white situation. We have this whole beautiful spectrum of things that we feel, but when we come from a past that has trauma in it, even if we don't think it's traumatic, if we've got these adaptations, we sometimes don't know the spectrum. We only know safe and unsafe. And sometimes we don't even know safe. We just know numb or neutral and unsafe because we're just putting one foot in front of the other, try to do the next best thing. So we start with awareness. What do we feel like inside? And then what are the thoughts we're having that cause those things? Or what are the thoughts that happen once we feel that way? And then how do we go back and give ourselves some grace to heal them? And the reason I say give ourselves some grace is because 9 times out of 10, when I have somebody who comes into my office that has some kind of childhood issue, childhood trauma that's based specifically on their parents or a caregiver, so an attachment wound of sorts, they're almost always hesitant, not just to look back. Sometimes they'll look back and they'll be able to tell me in a very neutral tone, here are all the horrible things that happened when I was young. So sometimes they can look back. Sometimes they can't even look back. They don't even want to talk about that. They just want to talk to me about what's going on right now. And they don't want to know that it has any connection to anything that had to happen to them in the past, because that is terrifying. The prospect of having to look back is terrifying. If they can get past that part and look back, they very often are hesitant to truthfully embrace the role of the caregivers in it. And I'll share a little personal story here. I am the child of a widow, meaning my father died when I was 4. He was sick when I was 3. He died by the time I was 4. And so my mother raised me pretty much as a single mom for the bulk of my life. Therefore, and she did a great job. She did a great job. I had a lovely childhood and I really adored her. She has also since passed, so that's why I speak of her in the past tense. But I got to motherhood of my own and started to realize, like, she wasn't perfect. She didn't do everything right. I had some real difficult adaptations that I had along the way created in order to survive certain situations that were probably because of some things she did and some choices that she made. And she was an incredible mother. And I loved her so much. And I think I wouldn't want it any other way. And there were some things about me that were a direct relationship to how she treated me and what she had the capacity to do as a single, widowed mother with very little income and a pretty nasty childhood of her own. That grace, I had to give both of us. I had to give myself the grace to look back and realize I could hold those two things. Both that my mom was an incredible and wonderful and amazing mom who did the absolute best she could. And sometimes that wasn't exactly what I needed. I had to give us both grace in that moment to be able to hold those two things and realize they can both be true. If we're not willing to do that, if we're not willing to give ourselves the grace to look back and let go of some of the responsibility we're carrying because we think it's our job to change and adapt and fix anything that was given to us as a small child, or that we, have this sort of hero look back on our parents and we don't want to put anything on them or blame them. I always hear from people, I don't want to blame my mother. I don't want to blame my father. And that's not what this is about. In fact, you can only truly heal when you accept that there is no blame in this situation. Now, I'm not talking about like completely neglectful and abusive and horrible situations. That's a whole different beast, although there's still some room for compassion there too. I'm talking about you look back and you say, I had a great childhood. I don't understand why I fight with my husband all the time over this one thing. I'm talking about those moments. I'm talking about the sort of sneaky childhood attachment wounds that we don't necessarily realize we have until somebody's able to point them out. And largely that's because we're afraid to look back and say anything bad about our childhood. So that grace comes in when you're willing to say, okay, I can look at it for what it was and recognize that, yeah, sometimes I didn't get what I needed and I adapted this way because of it. And now I'm ready to change that. And I love my mother to death. I love my father to death. I think they're the greatest people that ever lived. And sometimes what they did wasn't enough for me. We can all give them the grace necessary to do that. That's how we heal. So the awareness of what's going on for us, that answers that question of what is happening, and the grace comes in for why is it happening? If we can give ourselves grace to look back with honest eyes and have everybody take their role for it. Nobody needs to have the conversation with them. You don't need to go to your mother and ask for forgiveness. You don't need to go to your father and tell them that it was their fault. You just need to be able to look back and say, oh, this thing happened to me, and I think I'm behaving this way as a result. And I need to let that part of me relax. I don't need to protect myself from this thing anymore, or I don't need to believe this thing anymore. I don't need to believe I'm totally on my own and nobody else is going to help me, because I've now met people who are helping me. I'm now getting that support in my life, or at least this person's trying to be that. So I can let go of the part of me that thinks I'm never going to have any help. I'm never going to be supported. I have to do it all on my own. That's the grace of being able to look back and then being able to have that duality of these things were great and these things weren't. And both are true. I had a great childhood and there were things I didn't get that I needed. Mostly my friends were great. Once in the 7th grade, something really horrible happened to me and it stayed with me for a really long time. Those are that's the duality that we need to embrace in order to be able to fully heal from things. Because until we can sort of give both of those truths equal footing, it's difficult to answer the question of what is happening and why is it happening. If we can't answer honestly the why, which is, oh, I established this belief about myself, or I established this coping mechanism as a result of this thing that happened to me back when I was young. If we can't acknowledge that, then it's difficult to answer the question, why is it happening? And so then it's difficult to heal it. So once we have that awareness of the what is going on in our body, we can look back at, well, why might that be happening? And you might think, oh, I can name it. I can tell you, oh, this happened because when I was a kid, this happened to me. And I've been thinking that way all along. You might be able to intellectualize it all up here. You might have been like, I've already gotten step 2, Christy. I've already gotten the why. But if you haven't done that awareness piece of what's happening inside my body, how does this manifest physically inside my body when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling frustrated, when I'm feeling whatever, that disconnect means that you might not be able to fully heal it. And often that's what happens. I get wonderful, beautiful clients in my office who have done so much work and they have thought themselves, round and round and round and round. They've thought they can name everything. They can tell me every reason. They can point to every single touchstone memory and tell me what's going on. And still they're like, I keep doing the same thing. Why am I doing the same thing? And usually, not all the time, but usually it's because their brain and their body have not connected. They can intellectualize all of it. They can say, my mother was great and these things, I didn't get these things, but they haven't made the physical connection of, I am safe in this vessel that I walk around in all day long. I no longer have to protect myself from that thing that happened when I was young. Even though up here, they've made peace with it. They know, like, I know why this is happening. I know what's happening. I know why this is happening. And I can't stop. It's because they don't actually know what is happening. They haven't tuned in physically to what's going on. And it's a new science. It's a new arm of psychology. It's a new arm of behavioral health. It's a new arm of medical health. This connection between our mind and our body and our thoughts and our feelings, physical feelings, sensations. So it's not surprising that some people have been in therapy for 20 years and they're just getting to this now. It's not surprising that I am just learning about it fairly recently. And that's because I'm relatively new to the field. I spent all these years in education and in my gut knew there was some sort of disconnect, but didn't until I got into the psychology field, and the psychology field had started to embrace this. I was able to see it. So we've got our awareness. We've got our physical awareness. We've got our mental awareness, our thoughts and our body and our mind and everything is connected. And then we have given ourselves and our past the grace to be able to look back with an openness to hold those dual truths, those two opposing thoughts. My childhood was great or my childhood was terrible because my childhood was terrible and I'm great is also really hard for people to hold. You might say, oh, my childhood was great and I recognize that things happened that weren't so great. But you might also say, oh yeah, my childhood was terrible. Everything was there. My mother had mental illness. My father was abusive. Somebody drank. You might be able to do all those things. And you think I'm successful and I'm doing all these things and I'm happy, quote unquote, I'm happy and my family is intact and all these things. And yet I still feel something inside that's not right, or I keep repeating the same pattern and I don't understand why. And you're like, because I've admitted all these things and I've made peace with it. I love that. That's one of my favorite phrases that I get. I've made peace with this. Well, okay, you've made peace with it, but you're still repeating all these same patterns. And so being able to hold the duality of my childhood was terrible, or I came from a really abusive and unsupportive background, and I'm okay. Those are the two truths that are very often harder for people to handle. And they intellectually think, yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm doing everything right. I'm successful. But they don't feel it. It's not in here. Going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, they're the people that don't know what safe feels like. They're always on the lookout for the next danger around the corner. They grew up believing they're the only ones that were going to take care of themselves because nobody else met their need. And so even as adults, with all their needs met in many ways, they've got successful careers, they've got decent relationships, they've got great kids, they've got a nice house, they've got a boat, whatever. They have all these things that should mean that they feel safe, and they don't. Though that's the duality that they struggle with because they haven't connected that physical mind and body, and they don't know what safe feels like. They haven't healed a part of themselves that is still adapted to that childhood that they can intellectually tell you was terrible. They haven't felt the healing of that yet. And so if you have an awareness of that felt sense, that goodness, that safeness, that I am okay in this body, I am safe, I am kind, I am good, I am protected, then it's really hard to ever be able to hold the duality of this happened then, this is who I am now. Either way. So this is what we work through. This is what we work through in therapy. This is what we work through in intensives. This is what we work through when clients come to see me and they just say, I feel gross. Because often that's what it is. People come to therapy sometimes with really particular instances. You know, they'll say, my mother was this, or my father was this, or I just got divorced, or, you know, my kids are making me question everything, or whatever it is. They sometimes have not sometimes, they always have a current day problem. What we usually find is the reason that the current day thing is a problem is because they're reacting to it with some old messages, with some old hurts, not in a way that really serves them today. So what's happening? What's happening is you're triggered. Your nervous system is reacting as if you are back in a dangerous situation. Why is it happening? That's for you to discover. by openly looking at your past, openly looking at some patterns, openly, questioning, wondering, asking, why would I feel this way in these types of things? And then how do I heal it? You learn how it feels to feel good, and you learn why you didn't feel good and why you maybe are translating that into these moments now. This isn't to say you're always going to feel good. Again, our goal is to be able to recognize the difference between discomfort and pain. So if we can move from unsafe to simply annoyed, simply frustrated, simply sad, then the rest of life becomes much easier. So healing old wounds is 100% necessary. It's 100% doable. It has nothing to do with you being broken. And really what's helpful is awareness and grace and being able to hold the duality that you are good no matter how things looked for you in the past, or no matter how you view the past. You are still good. Good luck. Thank you for listening. And I hope you are wondering how you can make yourself feel better.